The person who controls the meaning controls the movement. We're seeing that with the radicalization in the US right now. You do not have the right to claim to be a leader unless you can hear both sides and find something of value in both sides. As a leader, your job is to make your people feel gotten, that you actually get them, you know where they're coming from, you understand them. That's an emotional connection. And if they don't feel gotten, they'll show up for work, but they won't be there. I'm infuriated at this mess. I want to kill the culprit. And when I get into the living room, there's the culprit on the couch, all curled up and looking all comfortable. And I scoop my cat up into my arms and pull him close to my chest. And he's cold. And he's dead. I didn't cry, I wept. I'm crying for the fact that I'm dead. I'm dead inside, and who I was is dead. And now I have to decide who I'm going to be.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Changing Minds podcast. My name is Owen Fitzpatrick, and today I'm really excited because I get to interview someone who's become a friend over the last couple of years. I've had the pleasure of appearing on his podcast, his amazing podcast, and he really is something else. Dov Baron has been twice named to the list of the world's top 30 global leadership gurus and Inc. magazine's top 100 leadership speakers. He's presented to companies and organizations worldwide, from the UN, the Department of State, the World Management Forum in Iran, and even the US Air Force, to name but a few. Dov's focus is on human behavior and neuroscience, which obviously makes it perfect for the Changing Minds podcast. And he's the world's leading expert in what he calls emotional source code and the anatomy of meaning. He's also the best-selling author of a number of books, including One Red Thread and Fiercely Loyal, how high-performing companies develop and retain top talent. And he also has a book coming out very soon, all about belonging, which we're going to dive into and explore along with everything else. But Dov, so great to have you on the podcast finally.
Thank you so much, Owen. I'm really excited to be here. Yeah, I always love our conversations. You and I end up on weird and wild and wonderful tangents. Yeah, and nobody gets to know. It's just us. So it's great to share it with your audience.
100%. And look, as I said, I was looking forward to this, not just for the actual podcast, but just to have a chat to someone like yourself, because I love, as you said, going back and forth. I do want to start off by talking about your sort of a lot of the work that you do, your life's work. And in particular, there's a concept which I think is very powerful, aligns very much with the kind of work that I talk about, which is emotional source code. Could you share with the listeners what it is and why it matters so much, especially to those leaders out there that are looking to be more effective?
The simplest way to think about it is it's your emotional DNA. That's where we need to start. But let's talk about just initially about why it matters. So every decision you've ever made, whether it's in business or in love, is filtered through something called your emotional logic. That's not rational. People will tell you, oh, I'm a very logical thinker. Or you might even say, well, think logically about it. That's like asking somebody to touch their ear with their elbow. The fact of the matter is that human beings are post-rational. Our fast, unconscious emotional code makes the decisions, makes the choices for us long before our rational brain justifies them. So, for instance, a CEO might reject a flawless merger because they feel like, oh, it's erasing the struggle of their youth. A logistics chief might resist making an efficiency cuts because they can't help but feel for the faces of the drivers who will be removed. You may believe that you're above all of this, above the emotionality of it, that your logic, but your logic is always bent to your emotional source code. It's a neurobiological program that shapes our being from our upbringing, our culture, our values. It decides threats, love, hunger, and countless other factors. So that's how it impacts us. What is it? That's a different understanding, but I want you to understand what it's impacting first.
In my book, Inner Propaganda, I talk about in order for a belief to be adopted, it has to feel right, it has to fit in, and it has to make sense, right? And the feel right is oftentimes exactly along the lines of what you just said. Often we skip over that. We just try to make it make sense. We just use logic to try to reason it through. What I love about your approach is that you're again going almost against the whole nature of, okay, we've got a logical brain and we've got an emotional brain. And that's one of the biggest misconceptions, I think, out there in the field.
Absolutely.
The way in which our brains work is that we always are using both. Our brain works in networks as opposed to parts of the brain are working. And there's that ventral medial prefrontal cortex, the VMPFC, which once again is a critical part to us being able to make decisions based on what's going to happen. So when it comes to the emotional source code, I think that's a really important and remarkable way of thinking. When you communicate that to the first time to business leaders, when you're dealing with such an inbuilt, ingrained cultural concept of how emotions work, how do you get the leaders to see, hang on a second, the way you think the world is working or your brain is working doesn't work that way, and this is what is actually going on?
For me, you know this, Owen, very well. Human beings are brilliant at rationalizing bullshit. As I call it, rational lies. We rationalize, it's just rational lies. And so one of the ways to convey a complex thing in a way that works is always through metaphor. You know that. We work brilliantly with metaphor. We can understand very difficult concepts if we put them into a metaphor. And so the metaphor is always the way into that. And so, for instance, I'll say, okay, let's say you're absolutely right, that you are more rational than you are logical. And I'll say, when you fell in love, what was it about your wife or your husband or your partner that you fell in love with? And they'll tell me a bunch of things. And I said, where was that on your rational list? And they'll go, well, you know, blah, blah. And I go, but what was the thing that made you fall in love? It wasn't that checklist of all the rational things. They have to come from a good home. They have to have a background in faith or blah, 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 or have this kind of money. Or like, what was it? And they go, aside from that, I don't know. And I said, I'll tell you exactly what it is. And it's the very thing that will make you a great leader. And they go, what? I said, there was a point, and tell me if I'm wrong, there was a point when you had a conversation with a friend or someone you trusted, and you said, I'm thinking about asking this person to be with me as my partner for life. And they said, why? And you said, I love that person. And they said, why? And you said, they get me. That's what falling in love is, being gotten. Gotten has nothing to do with rationale. It's everything to do with a feeling of like, I'm home. I feel gotten. As a leader, your job is to make your people feel gotten, that you actually get them. You know where they're coming from. You understand them. That's an emotional connection. And if they don't feel gotten, they'll show up for work, but they won't be there. They'll do the job, but they won't actually be present. If they're present, if they feel gotten, they feel like they're connected, they're bonded, they're in a culture of belonging where they feel like they're part of something, and that's all emotional, and that will always impact your bottom line.
So before we get back to the emotional source code thing, because I do want to dig into that a bit more, I do want to just take up what you just said there. And I know this is to do with the book that's going to be coming out soon in terms of belonging. A lot of times people confuse the notion. I saw something that you wrote recently about the difference between fitting in and belonging. And fitting in, I think, is helpful in some contexts, of course, but there's a huge difference between fitting in and belonging, and huge ramifications in terms of your performance, your longevity at an organization, and how successful the culture of the organization is. Could you talk to us about the difference of belonging versus fitting in, and specifically, what are some examples that might differentiate a leader helping their team fit in, or their team member fit in, versus helping their team member belong?
Thanks for asking that. It's a good question. So, we all read Good to Great. It was a fantastic book. But is its time up? I think it is. And we are now living in a post-pandemic world. So let's think about the world before the pandemic. We had bridge clubs, we had bowling clubs, we had a bunch of social ways to be. And then the pandemic came and it shut all that down. And how many people do you know who went back to those clubs? Most people didn't. They don't feel a place where they have a community. that hunger within us, because we're tribal beings, is still there. At a primal psychology level, we still want to belong. We still want to be part of a tribe, but we don't know where that tribe is anymore. It's disoriented. Even some of my friends who are very big on faith are attending church online. It's not a community anymore. So that hunger is still within us. Now, when we go back to good to great, let's get the right people on the right bus in the right seat. And that meant, wear your button-down shirt and your khaki pants and look like. And, and I remember having one of my clients who was a very senior executive, and he says, yeah, I think I'm a DEI hire. And I said, why? Like, he's brilliant. So why do you say that? He goes, because I'm the only brown guy on the team. I go, no, that's not why you were hired. And he goes, why? He said, I'm hired because I look different. I said, yeah, you're hired because you look different, but you're hired because you think the same. That's the problem. They hired you and asked you, can you think outside the box? And you said yes, and then they shoved you in the box. And they punished you every time you stepped out of the box. That's fitting in. It's how can you fit in with our culture? How can you fit in with our mindset? Which means we are committing to our restrictions. When we belong, we bring all of ourselves together, all of ourselves into the environment. So if you work for me, I don't care if you show up with a beard and a long dress. I don't care as long as you do what you say you can do. And I want to create space for you. And this is what we talk about with organizations about the book. Is I want to create space for you to show me what you have that we didn't hire you for. What is it that you've boxed away, that you've disenfranchised in order to fit in? Because when we bring that in, now you're showing up and you're thinking not only outside the box, but you're growing us. There's a huge difference. One is restrictive, which is fitting in, put that piece of puzzle in there. The other is belonging, where I'm held in a very open way, so that I can expand and I can grow, and I've got community. That's the key.
That makes a lot of sense. I'm getting the sense of the importance of authenticity and also vulnerability. And I know you've talked in the past about vulnerability as being a weapon of mass influence or mass trust, I think you put it. But when you talk about the importance, I have a concept I call confident vulnerability, which is the ability to confidently be vulnerable, right? Because I think it's important, because sometimes, people might perceive vulnerability as a form of weakness, which it isn't, but it's because they're opening themselves up to possibility. When you think about vulnerability, how do you share, number one, why it matters so much? But number two, most importantly, what are some strategies that you share with leaders to help them to demonstrate this form of vulnerability in the most effective way?
Really great question. So first of all, let's start with authenticity. So authenticity is a bullshit word. And I'll just tell you why I say that, because this is an authentic phone, right? Everything's authentic. It is what it is. That's what it means. It is what it is, right? So, people say, I'm being authentic. No, you're being an asshole. Well, that's who I am. No, that's not who you are. That's how you're behaving. So there's a lot of misunderstanding with authenticity. And real authenticity is the willingness to show up and be vulnerable. Now we have to discern what vulnerability is, because people think vulnerability is showing up and blowing snot bubbles and crying and weeping. No, that's not vulnerability. A lot of the time that's just whining. A lot of the time that's just complaining. True vulnerability, particularly for a leader, one of the things I tell them is you have to do it with discernment. As a leader, you have to employ discernment. What does that mean? It means leaders have to go first. Leaders lead, so you go first. So listen, Bob, you seem to be having a few challenges lately. What's going on? Is it work here or is it personal? Well, it's kind of personal. Hey, Bob, I got to tell you, my life's not perfect either. I want to understand. Help me out here. I just created a little bit of vulnerability, just a tiny bit of vulnerability. My life's not perfect because I'm seen as perfect because I'm the boss. Okay, and Bob goes, I'm just having some problems inside of my marriage with my son. He's going through some things. Do you want to tell me more about that? Well, not really. Well, I can tell you that, with my own kids, I've had some real struggles back when they were in high school, blah, blah, blah. A little bit. It's not, oh, my kid's a drug addict, and I'm, pouring everything out, which, first of all, is not empathetic. It becomes narcissistic. You steal the light and call it vulnerability. Stealing the light from somebody is not vulnerability, and it's not empathy. What it is narcissistic behavior. So you only give it in levels, just a little increment at a time. You be discerning about it. That builds mutual trust. When you build that mutual trust, the mirror neurons in the brain fire in both people. They feel like, oh, it's safe. This is a person. And the more that accelerates, then the brain starts to flood with oxytocin, which is the bonding hormone. So as we start to bond with each other, that's really important. Now, oxytocin is a whole other subject we can get deep into, but what you're looking for is to create that bond, that connection with those people through the vulnerability, and you do that through being authentically vulnerable while deeply embedded in empathy and compassion. There's a distinction. Empathy is, I feel what you feel. Compassion is, I feel what you feel. How can I help you to do something about it? It's not, so one is passive and the other is active.
I particularly love the example that you gave there, because I think when we're walking that fine line, when we're trying to balance the notion of being able to be vulnerable, but not do the whole one-upmanship, which you kind of alluded to. It's the nature of, you think you have it bad, I've got to really... So the
luxury! I used to dream of that. Walk to school every day.
Yeah. But that's the thing. A lot of times people fall into that trap of like, if I share my stuff, then, to your point, it becomes more about you. But I like the distinction you made, because I think there's something to be said for our ability to be able to let someone else know in a world where you go online and all you see is everyone else seems to have it figured out. Everyone else seems to have the ideal holiday, ideal relationship, ideal family. Everyone's smiling in every picture, and that's in our face 24/7. So when you're in a circumstance or in a world where that happens, it can be easier than ever to feel lonely and to feel like you're in particular dire straits compared to the rest of the world. So when your boss, who to your point, you look up to and you perceive as having it all, and they must be so successful, and maybe they own the company or run the company or they've been leader for years, it's easy to fall into the trap of thinking that they have it, and giving them little clues, as you said, that helps them to see, well, you know what? It's not all that it's cracked up to be. It's not perfect, and these are the lessons I've learned. I think is a really, really astute observation. I want to dive into something that you were just alluding to there in terms of this notion of empathy and also bringing it back to belonging. At the moment, Dov, we live in a world where belonging matters more than ever, but at the same time, belonging is also, we could argue, culpable in negatively impacting the world quite significantly. And the tribalization, the polarization, the you name it, to me, it's getting worse, or it has been getting worse and worse over the last few years, especially online. When you share the importance, I know you're mainly speaking with leaders, helping them to form and build a culture of belonging, which can transform the organization. So I know that that's your specialty. But when you look outside of the corporate world and you look through a political, a socioeconomic lens, a geopolitical lens, given that you've spoken in the UN and you've spoken in all of these incredible places, what are your thoughts around the nature of belonging when it comes to the polarizing world, when it comes to the fact that, like Paul Bloom talked about in Against Empathy, the nature of oxytocin is oxytocin brings us closer together, but the problem is the closer you are to me, the more further away that you'll be to people that aren't like us. And so exactly. So could you talk a little bit about othering, talk a little bit of empathy, talk a little bit about belonging in relation to the challenges and what path forward you believe that society needs to go in for us to solve? Small question, but how do we solve? How do we solve all the world's problems, though? Come on.
No pressure, buddy.
Yeah, no pressure.
So what you bring up is an extremely valid point. And I want you to imagine that you're starving, and you come to me, and I have a loaf of bread and a knife. What is that knife? But knife is a thing that I could stab you with and see you as a threat to my piece of bread, or it's the thing that I can cut the bread and share it with you. So belonging is neutral. Human beings are tribal. That's neutral. It's how we behave in those tribes that matters, and what we do with that tribalism that matters. And as I said before, we are desperately hungry for a place to fit in and belong. Not just fit in, but belong. And of course, that's created the tribalism that we're seeing in the political arena. As you know, I advise political people. So yes, this is something that can be used very negatively. I did a post recently where I said, I was talking about the opioid crisis. I said the opioid crisis, Andrew Tate and the Republican Party that exists today are not problems. They're solutions. They're bad solutions, in my opinion. They're bad solutions to problems we're not addressing. So when I'm talking about belonging in a way that I'm talking about addressing the problem as it is, if a young man is lonely, he's going to look for a solution to that problem. And Andrew Tate is a solution to that problem. I think a very destructive solution. But if no one's offering a bloody solution, why wouldn't I go there? That's the thing I need. So if we have, it's upon us. We have a responsibility to create healthy belonging. Now, what does healthy belonging mean? It means exactly what I said before. You can show up any way you want, but let's find out what we have in common. Let's find out where we're bonded. So you say, well, I'm a Christian nationalist, right? And the other person says, well, I'm back AOC, I'm very left. Okay. And I say, well, tell me about family. And they both tell me about family. Is that a common ground? Maybe it's not, but maybe it is. Tell me about work, the workforce, or living wage, or whatever. We have to find that common ground. And in companies, when we're creating cultures of belonging, we have to find out what is the purpose of the founder, of the executive team, and then the collective purpose. And then we have to find out how you align with that. Do you align with that purpose? You don't have to align with all the rules, but you do align with that purpose, because that way, if you're not getting along with Fred and you want to strangle Fred, we're bonded by this common purpose. What we're here, this company is here to serve this audience, to serve these customers in this way. And my political views and your political views may be very different, but this is foundational. And we will stand shoulder to shoulder and fight on that hill together, because this is the purpose. And that's the distinction. If you don't give people that, human beings need purpose. And unfortunately, most people have not had the resources or the bandwidth to find their own purpose. And the answer to that is simply, the person who controls the meaning controls the movement. We're seeing that with the radicalization in the US right now. People are controlling the meaning, so they control the movement. And when you have that, people can go off in a very bad direction. So we must be responsible for creating a meaning that unifies. That's where it comes to.
Whenever I think about the challenges in relation to, again, the notion of belonging, I like the idea of, and it's very much to your point, it's also what Bob Cialdini talks about when he talks about his seventh principle of unity, right? It's the notion of choosing the category that you're going to be part of when it comes to other people. So we are both, and then inverted commas, we could be both European, we could be both psychologists, we could be both in business, we could be both of a certain religion, of a certain, like there's a lot of different ways to categorize. And so often in the world we live in today, but the problem is that so often those groups don't serve us. So seeing ourselves as together with this group because they hate the same things as we do isn't always conducive. But oftentimes it's usually the hate directed towards groups of people. So when it comes to, again, solutions around cultivating those kind of groups in a larger scale, let's say you're a leader and you're dealing with folks on both sides of the aisle that have very strong political views. As a leader, how can you navigate the journey with your team such that people don't start to allow the political differences to cause, ructions in the business?
Well, again, I think that there's a responsibility upon the leader to first of all, to elicit the purpose of the organization, and then to elicit the purpose of each of the individuals in that organization, and find that place where we unify together. And that has to constantly be the focus. We have to constantly bring people back to that. Because again, the person who controls the meaning controls the movement. And what happens is a lot of the times the company doesn't bother to control the meaning. And so things get distorted. So, very recent news, as I'm sure you're aware, Charlie Kirk was assassinated. He's a right-wing speaker, a Christian nationalist, etc., etc. But for me, it's like, yeah, you're on the right and you're screaming about the left and maybe the left did this. Or you're on the left and screaming about, well, this is a good example of where gun laws need to be strengthened. But let's just start with, hold on a second, this was a human being who was killed in front of his own wife and 2 children, 31 years old. Is there any part of that that's right for you? Because if it's right for you, then we don't have any unification. And I'm okay with that. I don't hate you. There's nowhere for me to find common ground with you. But if you're open to where we might have a common ground, let's unify around that. Let's explore where we come together around this, because Charlie Kirk is Charlie Kirk, but there was 2 leaders of the House in Minneapolis, or Minnesota rather, who were assassinated earlier this year. They're the people who are not as politically strong as in public figures, but these are still human beings who were killed. So we have to look at where can we come together, and in a work environment. First of all, I think it's one of the things that, from a psychology point of view, that is so often missed, and I think the leaders are terrified of it right now, is we have to create great boundaries. Like, boundaries are desperately missing in organizations. We've got rules, but rules are bullshit. Rules are bullshit. Everybody think when you were a teenager, you wanted to break the rules. That's not gone away from you. That's a part of you. So it's not about that, but it's understanding consequences with boundaries. That's a vastly different thing. This is how we treat each other here. This is not a rule. It's just the way we operate. If you don't want to do that, that's okay. You just can't be here, because we're going to operate out of love and respect and compassion, etc.
I think that's a great answer. There's one last thing on this, and then I want to move back to the emotional source code. But when it comes to these kinds of tragedies, right? You go online, which is the worst thing to do at the best of times, to be honest.
To the swamp.
That's it. But you go online and there's so much hate there, and these people are getting belonging from hate. And again, on both sides, right? And we keep saying that, but there's a lot of hate there where people can justify these kind of things. And you look at that and you could easily argue they're getting a sense of belonging because for them, they've established themselves. They know the enemy, and human beings have a phenomenal ability to storify everything, to turn everything into a story.
Yep.
Where always we're the heroes of the story, and the dark side of the Force, the Darth Vader, is this. And I feel that nowadays, like, you take America internally, if you go anywhere in the States and you actually meet people, it doesn't matter where they're from, 99.999% of people, at least I have, that you meet, they're good people, really good people, full of love, full of care. It doesn't matter what the religion is. It doesn't matter what part of the States they're from. It doesn't matter if they're, like me, an immigrant to America. It doesn't really matter. For the majority of people, they're good people. But when you see the world through the lens of online, which obviously the algorithm tends to highlight the worst kind of comments, the most dramatized, exaggerated forms of communication, it's easy to start to see a world where you go, this is my tribe that I belong to, and these are the enemy. I think in a very sort of didactic, us versus them mentality. What are the things that you think can happen to start to bring us together online, right? So you've given some great insight in terms of culture, the culture of belonging from a workplace perspective, or even many of the things you said could easily be done in terms of families or in terms of social groups. But online, what are the kind of things that you think we can do to start to heal the cesspool of hate that it's just everywhere?
Well, I mean, that's a huge question because it's really simple to understand that there's money to be made in hate,
Yeah.
right? So I can sell advertising if there's clicks. And what brings clicks is negative news. So what can we do? Oh, I don't control the algorithm, so I don't know that. But I'll tell you that my news feed on social media is very different than most people's. People go, how do you know these things? And I said, because I love to fuck with the algorithm. And they go, what do you mean? I click on purposely things I disagree with. I click on things I agree with. I make sure I click on lots of different things so that the algorithm is sending me a mixed bag. Now, I also don't get my news from the traditional news places. I get it from other places, not conspiracy places, but places that are well researched. So I think that we have a personal responsibility because I can't change Mark Zuckerberg's algorithm. I can't change Elon Musk's algorithm. I can't change the algorithm of what those organizations are doing. I have a personal responsibility to make sure if I'm going to be on those platforms that I'm clicking on things that will confuse the algorithm. So the algorithm goes, oh, this person likes both sides, because the algorithm just gives you what you like. That's all it's doing. It gives you the thing you spend the most amount of time on. So I'll click on something I don't like and I'll let it run. I'll turn the sound off, I'll let it run, and I'll go make myself a cup of coffee because I have to take personal responsibility for that. But I also have to take responsibility for understanding, because sometimes I do listen, to understanding both sides. Like, where's the rationale in this? This seems nuts to me, and therefore I must listen to it. I must, get past my own biases, because you know this better than almost anybody on the planet. You're one of the great experts in this, is that we are constantly looking for evidence of that which we believe to be true, even if what we believe to be true is completely false. So I have a personal responsibility to challenge my own belief systems. So I have to willingly step into that. And for me, you do not have the right to claim to be a leader unless you can hear both sides and find something of value in both sides. I remember having a conversation with with a guest on one of my podcasts, and we were talking about economics and a certain thing, and she said something, and I said something, and she goes, no, you're absolutely wrong. And I said, fantastic. Tell me more. And in the break, because, you've been on the show, we take a break halfway through. In the break, she goes, that was an interesting response. And I said, what? I didn't know what she was talking about. And she goes, well, when I told you were wrong, you said, tell me more. And I said, oh, yeah, I love it when you breach my bias. That's great for me. That means I'm learning. She goes, that's a very unusual response. And I said, but it's a response we need a lot more of.
When you said that in the book, is something I've talked about before, I might have mentioned it to you, is the concept of what I call a belief growth mindset. And it's basically the Carol Dweck's mindset, but applied to beliefs. And the idea of exactly what you demonstrated there. And Adam Grant talks about Danny Kahneman as well, author of Thinking Fast and Slow, that he was like that too. And I like to believe I'm like that as well, is that when we're wrong or when you're wrong about something, the belief growth mindset is you believe that you can update your belief, you can update your priors, you can believe better as a result of it. You don't have to be constrained because you're afraid to be wrong, or you're afraid that what your belief isn't describing the world perfectly. So I love that example. But I also think that could be one of the core solutions as well, is that educating people, just because you believe it doesn't make it so. A large part of that is the work we do when we're working with people with mental health challenges, right? It's you're trying to get them to realize the cognitive distortions are not leading you in the way that you need them to go. In decision-making for leaders, cognitive biases are not leading you to go in the direction you need to go in. All of these are great examples of this notion that just because we believe it doesn't necessarily make it so. And they're just linking back to emotional source code. When you gave a great example as to why it matters so much, could you just go into what are the kinds of elements that make up emotional source code? Like, you obviously use the term source code for a reason. So could you share with us a little bit about the idiot's guide to the emotional source code?
So let's go into this, and because there's a piece in here that's very much in your world around beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
you and I are both highly skilled, highly trained, neurolinguistically, NLP when it meant neurolinguistic programming, not related to large language models. And I remember when I sort of came across NLP 150 years ago, because I'm old. I remember when I came across it, and I thought it was the panacea. I mean, I just thought it was the greatest thing ever. And it was and is a phenomenal tool. It's not a panacea, but I thought it was so great because I could see how it could shift beliefs. And I became very good at doing belief change. Very good at it, like phenomenal at it. But I noticed it wouldn't stick. It would stick, but not, like I would do it well and it would stick, but it wouldn't stick for long enough. And so understanding the emotional source code, that's what actually pushed me deeper into the emotional source code. So let's work it backwards first and then we'll work it forwards. So backwards, you, me, we, all of us have behaviors. And we go, hey, this is a shitty behavior. I don't want to do this anymore. Right? This is ruining my marriage. It's ruining my business. It's ruining my parenting. Whatever it is. I need to change this behavior. Well, if you go to anybody who says, any psychologist or anybody worth their salt and say, I want to change the behavior, they go, okay, well, what's the belief driving that behavior? Because the belief driving the behavior. What is the belief? Or what is the belief or set of values driving that behavior? For me, it's belief / set of values. So if we're going to change the behavior, we're going to change the beliefs and the values. And they go, yeah, okay, I get it. So we do some really great strategic belief shifting. Fantastic. But it doesn't stick. Why doesn't it stick? Because at the center of your emotional source code, there's 5 levels to it. So 3 levels down, right in the middle, is your identity. People will die for their identity. If I ask somebody, what's the most important thing in life? The answer is life. Right? Above everything else, it's life. It's the Hippocratic oath, right? It's like, do no harm. It's like, I keep alive, stay alive. I will kill another person if my own life or life of those I love are in threat. Life is the most important thing. That is logically true, but not emotionally true. How do I know? Because people strap bombs to themselves and blow themselves up. They give up their life in the present for an identity in the future. So identity is more important than life itself. We will die for our identity. So if you change a belief that interferes with an identity, they will revert to the identity. So what puts the identity in place? The level below that is called the anatomy of meaning. And the anatomy of meaning comes out of the foundation, which is where you were born and the circumstances, the milieu of that. So I was born, as you know, I was born in Northern England in abject poverty, surrounded by crime and violence and addiction and abuse and all those kinds of things. That was my framework for the world. Remember, up to, a decent age, that's the only thing I know to be true is this environment. I think everybody lives this way. And anybody who doesn't live that way lives in a fantasy on telly, but not in real world, because I look around and there's Kieran Gilmartin and they came to England from Ireland to get away from the troubles and they've got 11 kids and they're piss poor as well. So, then there's the other guy down the street who came here from Pakistan and he's poor as heck as everything. So everybody, no matter where they're from, lives in my world. And that's the only world I know. So by that environment, not just external environment, but internal environment, I work out how to survive. Human beings are terrible creatures when you think about earthlings. Like, the elephant pops out a baby and then walks off. Right? If you pop out a baby and you're a human, you're gonna hang around for a few years. You've got to hang around because that baby's gonna die without you. Human beings are very dependent upon those that we come into the world with. So we work out, how do I survive in this environment? That survival is not logical or rational, but it builds our emotional logic. And the emotional logic is not rational logic. It says 2 plus 2, logically, rationally is 4. But in your emotional logic, 2 plus 2 might be a giraffe. 2 plus 2 might be rage, anger, frustration, sadness, rescuing. It could be a billion things, all of which you work out. This is the meaning I have to give this environment so that I can survive. Out of that survival, I then determine, well, this is who I must be. I'm a rescuer. That's who I am. because I built all this meaning under here. I'm a rescuer. So what beliefs do I have if I'm going to be a rescuer? These are my beliefs and these are my values of that of a rescuer. Well, how do I behave? I behave like a rescuer. It's 5 levels deep, up and down. It goes up and down. So we can change the belief, but if we don't address the identity, it will go back, because the belief only reinforces the identity. So does the behavior. If we don't examine the anatomy of meaning, then the identity will always stay in place. If we don't examine the anatomy of meaning, we don't understand the context of how we were born and where we were born. And what that means is you can look at your brother and go, well, why are we so different? Because your brother was not born into the same family you were. And you go, yeah, he was. We had the same mom and dad. And I go, no. What was the economic situation of your mom and dad when you were born? What was the economic situation of your mom and dad when your brother was born? What was the marital status of your mom and dad when they were born? Were they madly in love when you were born because you were the firstborn? And then they were fighting like cats and dogs when your brother was born. What was their economic situation? Where were they living? When none of us are born into the same family. All those things determine different meaning, anatomy of meaning. All of those meanings determine identity, and the identity determines behaviors and values. Beliefs and values, and that determines behavior.
Fantastic. Really great explanation. It aligns so much with the work that I'm doing. So I think I'm really excited not just to read your new book, but also I think that the emotional source code is something that I can help a lot of people. For you, Dov, what was the moment where, was there a moment in your past, in your life, where you changed a specific belief or changed your identity in some way, or came to this sort of moment of revelation where you were struggling and you had that kind of moment of epiphany?
It's not a moment. It's a series of moments. And oftentimes those moments stack up into a bunch of things because human beings, we're pretty thick, right? So people will say, was it the moment when you fell off the mountain? In 1990, I fell 120 feet while free climbing and landed on my head and got smashed to pieces. And people go, is that the moment? And I go, yeah, not really. Not really. And they go, well, surely. And I go, no, that was my 4th fall. I fell 4 times. That was the 4th one. The first time was off Bluff Knoll, 70 feet in Western Australia. And I just dusted myself off instead of learning the lesson. What was this actually about? So it's not those moments. It's the moment. So I had lots of those, is my point. The question is, did I listen? And the moment that is the moment you're talking about, and that's why I don't want to dismiss the question outright, but want to have people understand at a deeper level, it's the moment you listen, not the things that happen. So I fell that 120 feet, got smashed to pieces, 10 or 11 reconstructive surgeries, and my jaw was wired closed. Even while I was in recovery, and on a Saturday night, my mates would come by and they'd say, we're going to take you out. I had no money. I was destroyed. And they'd take me out. And I'd go out with them with my jaw wide closed, and they say, how are you doing? I go, I'm great. I'm coming back. I wasn't great, and I wasn't coming back. I was deeply, darkly depressed, but my identity was, I'm a kid from Salford. I come from the ghetto. I'm tough. You can't beat me down. I'm going to make it. Not a bad survival mechanism, but a terrible growth identity. And I was deeply, darkly depressed while I was saying that. But then there was a Saturday night, I went out with the lads, and for the first time, I actually laughed. 9 months after. I'd been out before, and I'd faked laughing, and I knew I was faking it, but this night, I actually laughed. I had a good time. And I came home, and I'm walking down the path, I'm feeling a little bit of hope, like, oh, maybe I am coming back. This is great. And I opened the back door to walk into my kitchen. As I open that door, the light from outside sort of illuminates the floor. And across the floor is cans and garbage and kitty litter and coffee grinds. And it smells horrible. And that moment of potential joy is immediately transformed to pure rage. I'm infuriated at this mess. I want to kill the culprit. Now, I'm not a violent person, but I have this level of rage in me. I'm stomping through the house looking for the culprit. And when I get into the living room, there's the culprit on the couch, all curled up and looking all comfortable. I raise my hand and just a bit, and then that's not who I am. Like, there's a moment of like, that's not who I am. And instead, I scoop my cat up into my arms and pull him close to my chest. And he's cold. And he's dead. The reason he'd done all that in the kitchen is because he had a distemper attack and had destroyed the kitchen before he died. And I fell to my knees and I wept. I didn't cry, I wept. I mean, like, and I was probably there no more than a few minutes when I realized I'm not crying for the cat. I'm crying for the fact that I'm dead. I'm dead inside, and who I was is dead. And now I have to decide who I'm going to be. And that was the moment of change, because in that moment I realized I had three choices. I could keep up this bullshit act of I'm great, I'm coming back. That wasn't working. I could choose a second path, which was to become the victim of my story. And that was so seductive. It's not my fault that I failed. This happened to me. It was an act of God or whatever, which it wasn't. It was my stupidity. And the third option was to let it burn. To willingly let it all burn down and discover what is the phoenix that can rise from the ashes. People talk about these moments all the time. I'm the phoenix that rose from the ashes. And I go, what burned? And they go, well, what, if it didn't burn, you're not the phoenix. A phoenix can't rise from a fire that didn't exist. I had to burn it all down. I had to just let go of all the identity of who I was. That was the transformation moment. And that was, I already had 20 years of research into this. Well, not quite 20 years, about 14 years of research into the emotional source code. That's when I got it. That's when I realized, it's identity. It's the identity is where I'm stuck. That's the addiction. And that's why I can't get past anything. That's why it always circles back to the same pattern over and over.
When you, and a very powerful story, when you realized that and you said, okay, what's burned to the ground, the identity's dead, and you forged the new identity, did you find challenges in the sense of when you've people around you that care for you, love you, they tend to see you in a certain way and they tend to treat you in a certain way and they tend to expect you to be a certain way. And how did you deal with the, let's say, sometimes from a benevolent place, but the desire of folks to keep you as the Dov they know, as opposed to the transformed Dov that's going to build a brand new identity based upon where he wants to go as opposed to where he was?
Well, you're bringing it back to exactly what we've been talking about. You're talking about belonging to a tribe. And so they've let me in the tribe because I've been a certain way. And now I'm a threat to the tribe because I'm not that way anymore. So they don't want to lose a member of the tribe. And by the way, in a grander psychological positioning of that, just so you understand, they don't want you to behave in a way that will get you evacuated or removed from the tribe, because if you do, they will have to question why they're in a tribe. They don't want to do that. They want to say, I'm okay in this tribe. So they're going to get you to try and be the way you were, right? So it is self-protection as much as anything else. Maybe benevolence, but it's also self-protection. Now, the key in understanding this is, I'll give you a great example. In this process, in this work of like uncovering this identity and how I'd come to it and what I had to let go of, I said to my mom, who was visiting me from the UK and had been taking care of me, I said, let's go for dinner. So we went for dinner and we're sitting there now that the wires are off and I can chew. And I said, I need to have some boundaries with you. And my mother says, I'm your mother. You don't need boundaries with me. And I said, no, actually, you're my mother and I need boundaries with you more than anybody. Because I've behaved in a certain way with you since I was a kid, and I'm not that person. And she says to me, what happened to my kind, loving son? And I said, he's still here. But now I have a boundary. It's not automatic. And I think that when you step into being yourself in a real way, that is is often seen as a threat because I don't know what to do with you anymore. I don't know how to be with you anymore. And when people say, you've changed, our automatic response is, no, I haven't, as opposed to thank you.
Mm-hmm.
That's the response. Thank you. And so we don't want to admit that. The reason that, so I remember being fascinated by this. Why are people so afraid of personal development? Like, that was like mind-blowing to me, because I've always been that guy since I was a little kid. It was like, I don't understand it, but it's an identity threat, right? So I can go to the Tony Robbins program and I can yoo-hoo and rah-rah and this is great and leave motivated and go back to do my old shit and have bragging rights that I went to Tony's event. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with Tony's event at all, but I'm saying you're not changed because the identity's still in place. You're still going to protect that. The clients, the people I work with privately, are very high-profile individuals. They've got $1 billion. They're running political organizations. They're athletes. They're entertainers. They're powerful individuals. That identity has been built on purpose. What I want to do is help them to rebuild the personal identity, not the public identity, and then they become soulful. That's the distinction.
Love it. So appreciate you sharing, because I think the listeners and viewers are going to get a lot from that. I want to navigate to the quickfire round. So I'm just going to ask you some questions really quickly. Whatever comes in. Doesn't have to be the best or your favorite, but
Yeah.
something comes to mind. A favorite movie?
Well, geez, that's difficult. You know, I've really thought about that, and I still can't answer that question. I have a bunch of movies. I probably would say one of my favorite movies of all time is Revolver.
Revolver, great movie.
You know that movie?
I do. I saw it.
Most people don't know it.
Yeah, no, it's a great one. It's an old school one. Was it 90s?
No, early 2000s. Yeah,
Okay.
maybe
90s.
early 2000s, but it was like,
Yeah.
it's got a Guy Ritchie movie that's not a Guy Ritchie movie.
Yeah.
And I remember my friend recommending it. I watched the first 15 minutes like, this is crap. Because I was expecting,
Yeah.
Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels. And then I was like 15 minutes and I went, oh my God, I love this film.
Yeah. No, it's one of those ones that can get you. Favorite author?
Favorite author would be the author of my favorite book, I guess, which would be Khalil Gibran.
Fantastic. The Prophet.
Prophet is my Bible. I carry it everywhere.
Excellent. Favorite artist?
Are we talking music? Are we talking painting?
Well, music is next, the painting.
Salvador Dali.
Favorite artist, as in musical artist or musician or band?
Impossible for me, because I love everything from Beethoven to the Sex Pistols. I love The Clash. I love U2. I love the Carpenters.
All right.
So it's like,
You've named a few anyway.
so there's a lot in there. There's a lot in there, and a lot of old house.
Favorite philosopher?
Ooh, favorite philosopher. Again, for me, it still comes down to, even though that's not really the category, Khalil Gibran.
Yeah.
Like
No,
the philosophy of everything that's in the Prophet is, for me, is like, because it's a philosophy, but with a specific focus.
sure.
Friendship, work, love, it's.
Oh, yeah. No, he definitely qualifies in my book as a philosopher, I'm sure. Favorite TV series?
Oh, favorite TV series. Oh, in its day, I loved The X-Files, but I like shows that are very psychological.
Mm-hmm.
I used to very much like shows about profiling, because I do a lot of that as part of the emotional source code. Do I have a favorite series? I don't know that I do. I honestly don't know that I have a favorite TV series.
That's all right. If you could have any superpower, what would it be?
If I could have a superpower, what would it be? It would be to imbue others with curiosity.
That would be a solid one.
As a superpower, I'd be like, okay, now you're curious. So, not because curiosity is not asking questions and getting answers. You know this.
Mm-hmm.
Curiosity is asking questions, getting answers, and then asking more questions to get a deeper understanding. Well, if I could wave a wand and do that, I think we'd have a lot of problems solved in the world.
Yeah, it would bring more nuance and with that solutions to those. If you could travel anywhere, past, present, and future, when?
Oh, that's easy. I would travel 30 years into the future, maybe even 20. And people go, why such a short time? I want to see what this crazy shit, what happens. Like, I want to understand what my grandkids are walking into with AI without guardrails, with the polarization of political understanding, with the change in the geopolitics, the change in economics, the change in how money works in the world. Like, I just want to see 20 years into the future to see like what I can do today that can maybe potentially make a shift in the world for the better.
Fantastic. Just a couple more. Where would you live if you weren't living where you're living?
Oh, if I'm not living where I'm living, which is where I do love Vancouver, can I take my family? All my family?
Yeah.
Okay. Then I'm living in Fiji.
Great.
Where my wife is from.
Oh, fantastic. What profession would you have if you weren't doing what you're doing?
I remember being asked that question in front of my wife, and I remember struggling. And she goes, why are you struggling, you idiot? You know exactly what it is. I'm like, no. I mean, because my career involves writing and, there's a million different things, speaking, etc. She goes, you'd be a gardener. And I'm like, oh yeah, of course, that's exactly what I do. Because I just love gardening. That's my meditation. It's like, if I can go out and fiddle with the soil for a little while, I'm good.
Wow. And then finally, one piece of advice that if you could fit it on a billboard to humanity, what do you think you would tell them?
My sign-off. Stay curious, my friends. Stay curious.
Fantastic. Well, listen, I'm sure there's a lot of people that will find no problems whatsoever at staying curious after listening to this episode and want to learn a lot more about you. If they want to do so, which I'm sure they will, how can they learn more about you? How can they get their hands on your books? And where should they go online?
Thank you for asking. I really appreciate that. You can find out most of my stuff at dovbaron.com, DOVBARON.com. That's my main website. There's a link there, of course, to my podcast, The Dov Baron Show. My articles are on the Curious Chronicles that are on there. You can also find me on LinkedIn, which is the main social media platform that I'm on. I'm also on Twitter and now X, as well as LinkedIn and Instagram. But that's the main place. There's also a YouTube channel with 2,000 videos on it. But the bottom line is Google Dov Baron. You're going to get more than you could possibly cope with. And on top of that, I want to say, I know this is crazy, but you can actually write to me, dov@dovbaron.com. I actually answer all those emails. And the reason for that is very simple. As you know, as I said, I have a podcast, Dov Baron Show. And I know what it takes for Owen to put this together. This is not an easy job. You think it's chatting? It takes a lot. There's a lot of time and energy and effort that Owen puts into having guests, bringing guests on who dedicate their time and his time and then the post work. So here's what I'm going to ask you to do. I'm going to ask you to write to me, dov@dovbaron.com, and write to Owen. Tell us what you got out of this. And more importantly, what are you going to do with it? That's really important. That matters. Write to me, tell Owen, and if you want to find out more about my books, and my new book particularly, that's also on dovbaron.com, and there's also a special report called The Loneliness Tax that we're giving for free. You can go on dovbaron.com and find that, and a bunch of special reports that are all free, and you can go on the wait list for the book, all there.
Fantastic, Dov. That's wonderful, and we'll make sure to put the link on the show notes and your email address, if that's okay as well.
Absolutely.
Let people to do that. I'm also, by the way, everyone at owenfitzpatrick.com in case you've never emailed me before. Big thank you for everything, Dov. This was incredible. Really had a great chat. And as always, yet another phenomenal conversation. So thanks very much for being here.
Thank you, sir. Always a pleasure and an honor.
Thank you very much, everyone. I'm sure you enjoyed this as much as I did. For now, take care, be well. Until the next time, may the force be with you. Bye for now.